Ethan Cole had never thought that sharing a dorm room at the Interstellar Academy would change his entire life. He had come to the academy with big dreams, but simple expectations. All he wanted was to study, maybe learn about alien cultures, and perhaps one day get a job on a starship. He was one of the very few humans in the academy, so most people noticed him wherever he went. Still, he kept to himself, living a quiet routine. His roommate was Princess Zyra of the Starian Empire, though Ethan did not know the full truth about her at first. To him, she was just Zyra, a tall, graceful alien student with bright silver eyes and hair that shimmered under the lights like strands of liquid crystal. She was polite but distant, spending most of her time reading ancient texts or attending secret meetings with people who spoke in low voices. Ethan respected her privacy and never asked too many questions. What he did not know was that Zyra was betrothed to someone she had never met, a noble from a rival empire. This marriage was meant to keep peace between their people. Zyra disliked the idea, but she also knew the safety of millions depended on it. Her family had made arrangements, and the ceremony was supposed to happen very soon. Ethan's life, however, was ordinary. He went to classes, struggled with alien math that made no sense to him, and often cooked simple meals because he missed Earth food. On most days, he barely noticed that his roommate came from one of the most powerful families in the galaxy. Everything changed one bright morning. Ethan was eating breakfast in the common hall when a group of tall Starian guards entered. Their armor gleamed like polished silver, and their long cloaks brushed the floor as they walked. Everyone stopped talking when they entered. They looked around, their sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Then, to Ethan's surprise, they came straight toward him. "You are Ethan Cole?" one of them asked in a deep voice. Ethan swallowed his bite of toast and nodded nervously. Yes, that's me." The guard bowed his head slightly. "It is time. The ship awaits." Before Ethan could ask what they meant, the guards placed a long robe over his shoulders, a robe covered in glowing designs. It was heavy, warm, and obviously expensive. The other students in the hall gasped, whispering among themselves. Ethan tried to protest, but the guards moved quickly, guiding him out of the hall and into a waiting shuttle. "Wait, hold on," Ethan said, stumbling as they pushed him forward. "What's going on? Did I do something wrong?" The guard gave him a serious look. "You must be calm. The princess is waiting. Today is most important." Ethan blinked. Princess? He thought of Zyra, but that didn't make sense. Why would she be waiting for him? Before he could argue more, the shuttle doors closed, and the engines roared to life. The ship lifted off the ground, leaving the academy behind. Inside, Ethan sat stiffly on a cushioned seat while the guards stood around him. They did not explain much. They only said the destiny of two empires rests upon this journey. Ethan's heart pounded. He had no idea what they were talking about. When the shuttle docked with a massive star cruiser, Ethan's jaw dropped. The cruiser was enormous, larger than any ship he had ever seen. Its silver hull shimmered like starlight, and hundreds of glowing windows spread across its sides. It looked less like a ship and more like a moving city. The guards escorted him inside. The halls were wide, decorated with banners and carvings that showed the history of the Starian Empire. Strange glowing crystals lit the way, casting soft colors on the walls. Ethan felt as though he had stepped into a palace that floated among the stars at the heart of the cruiser. In a chamber, filled with flowing curtains and glowing orbs, stood Zyra. She wore a ceremonial gown that shimmered like liquid fire. Her silver eyes widened when she saw Ethan. "Ethan," she said, her voice sharp with surprise. "What are you doing here?" "That's what I'd like to know," Ethan said, throwing up his hands. "These people dragged me here. They said something about a princess waiting for me." Zyra's face turned pale. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "No, this cannot be. You were not supposed to be here. They must have mistaken you for someone else." The guards knelt before her, speaking in respectful tones. "Princess, the groom has arrived, just as planned. The union may begin at your command." Ethan's eyes went wide.
Groom, wait, no.
"I think you got the wrong guy. I'm not anyone's groom. I'm just a roommate who barely remembers to do his laundry." Zyra covered her face with her hand. "This is a disaster," she whispered. Ethan felt his legs grow weak. "Please tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding?" Zaira pulled him aside, away from the guards. "Listen carefully. I am supposed to be married soon, for political reasons. My family arranged it, but my betrothed is from another empire. They have never met me, and I have never met them. Apparently, these guards mistook you for that person." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "You mean they think I'm your fiancé?" "Yes," she said through clenched teeth. "And now, you are standing on a royal cruiser, wearing ceremonial robes, with dozens of witnesses who believe this is true." Ethan laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. We just have to tell them the truth, right?" Zaira shook her head. "If we do that here, it could insult both empires. They may see it as an attempt to trick them. Peace talks could collapse. Wars have started over less." Ethan rubbed his temples. "So what? I'm supposed to pretend to be your fiancé until when?" "Until I find a way to correct this without causing chaos," Zaira said firmly. "For now, you must play along. It is dangerous, but it may be the only way." Ethan wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes told him she was serious. He sighed deeply. "Fine, but just so you know, I have zero experience pretending to be a royal groom." Zaira almost smiled at his honesty. "You may find it easier than you think. Just stay close to me. Do not say anything foolish." The next hours passed in a blur for Ethan. He was introduced to nobles from across the galaxy, each of them curious about the human groom. They asked him questions about Earth, about human traditions, and about how he felt to be marrying into the Starian Empire. Ethan answered with the best mix of humor and honesty he could manage, and surprisingly, many nobles seemed charmed by his straightforwardness. Zaira watched carefully, both amused and worried. Ethan was clumsy, but his simple answers made people laugh in a way that eased the tension. She had expected disaster, but instead she saw curiosity in the eyes of the nobles. Yet not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the grand hall, figures whispered to each other. Some nobles narrowed their eyes, clearly unhappy about this strange human taking the place of a groom who was supposed to bring unity. Ethan noticed the stares, but he tried to ignore them. Later, when the crowd thinned, Ethan and Zaira stood together near a wide window that showed the endless stars outside. The galaxy stretched in every direction, filled with glowing nebulae and distant suns. "This is insane," Ethan said softly. "One day, I'm eating toast in the cafeteria, and the next, I'm standing on a star cruiser, pretending to be a royal groom." Zaira folded her hands, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. "You are right. It is insane. But sometimes the galaxy is shaped by accidents as much as by plans." Ethan gave her a sideways glance. "So what happens next?" She took a deep breath. "Next, the ship travels to the ceremonial world where the marriage was meant to take place. That gives us time. I will try to contact my family and find a way to fix this. Until then, you must stay in the role." Ethan nodded slowly. He felt trapped, but he also knew he could not simply run away. For better or worse, he was now part of something far larger than himself. Far across the hall, a shadow moved silently. A pair of eyes glowed faintly as a figure slipped away into the dark corridors of the cruiser. The mistake had already been noticed. Not everyone intended to let the human groom survive the journey. Ethan had no idea yet. But this mistaken identity was about to pull him into an adventure. It would test not only his courage, but also the fate of empires. The Celestial Veil was not just a star cruiser. It was a moving palace, a floating city, and a dream of shining silver drifting through the cosmos. For Ethan, everything about the ship felt unreal. He had grown up on Earth with old metal trains, noisy airplanes, and crowded subways. Now he stood inside long corridors filled with glowing crystals, soft music that came from invisible speakers, servants who bowed as he passed. It was overwhelming. He kept telling himself he was only here by mistake, that he was just a human student dragged into the wrong story. But every time he looked down at the glowing ceremonial robe they had given him, or saw the way other passengers stared at him with curiosity and respect, he remembered the truth to them. He was the groom Princess Zaira walked beside him, tall and graceful. She wore her ceremonial gown with dignity, but Ethan noticed her frustration. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes flicked nervously from guard to noble as they moved through the ship. She whispered to him without looking. Stay calm. Smile when you must. Speak little. If they think you are nervous, they will ask questions. Questions lead to suspicion. Suspicion leads to disaster. Ethan nodded. Right? Smile. Don't panic. Got it, but smiling was not easy. Every few minutes, nobles and officials stopped them to bow or offer gifts. A group of merchants presented rare fruits that glowed with their own light. A noblewoman placed a chain of crystal beads around Ethan's neck. Calling it a blessing of union, he muttered a thank you. Feeling like an actor who had no idea what role he was supposed to play, later that evening, Zaira led him into a vast dining hall. Long tables floated above the floor, supported by beams of light. Platters of strange food hovered in the air, spinning slowly so that guests could take what they wished. The ceiling was a window into space itself, showing distant suns and swirling nebulae as though the diners floated in open space. The feast was not only for eating, it was a celebration of union, a tradition for betrothed couples. Ethan soon found himself sitting at the head table beside Zaira, with dozens of eyes watching his every move. Servants poured glowing drinks into crystal cups. Musicians played instruments that looked like spinning glass towers. Do not drink too quickly, Zara whispered. That is fire wine. It burns in the throat. Ethan nodded, sipping carefully. The drink fizzed on his tongue like lightning and sent warmth down his chest. He coughed, but forced a smile as nobles laughed in approval. The food was stranger still. Plates of shimmering petals, slices of meat that shifted colors, soups that glowed faintly blue. Ethan tried each carefully. Some tasted sweet, others salty, and one dish made his tongue go numb for several minutes. Still, he nodded and pretended to enjoy it all. What do humans usually eat? One noble asked. Ethan froze. He had not prepared for such questions. We like bread and cheese. And, pizza? The noble frowned. What is pizza? Ethan smiled nervously. It's flat bread with sauce and melted cheese on top. Sometimes meat. Sometimes vegetables. It's simple, but good. To his surprise, the nobles leaned in with interest. They murmured among themselves, curious about this strange pizza. One even scribbled notes as if studying an ancient secret. Zaira gave him a look that was half irritation, half amusement. You are turning the dining hall into a human cooking lesson, she whispered. Better than insulting anyone, Ethan whispered back. The evening continued with performances. Dancers floated in midair, moving gracefully with glowing ribbons that left trails of light. Singers with voices like bells told stories of ancient marriages that had brought peace between galaxies. At the end, the lights dimmed, and a ritual began. A priest-like figure stepped forward, holding a crystal bowl filled with liquid light. He explained that it was tradition for the betrothed to share a vision together, a symbolic joining of minds. The crowd grew silent as the bowl was placed before Zaya and Ethan. Place your hands in the light, the priest instructed. Your spirits will meet in the realm of memory. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Zaira. She nodded firmly. Do not resist. If you fight it, they will know. Taking a deep breath, Ethan placed his hand in the glowing liquid. Zaira did the same. Instantly his vision blurred, and he felt himself falling into a dream. Colors swirled around him. He stood in a strange place that was not real, a landscape of stars, rivers of light, and floating islands. Zaira stood beside him, her gown glowing even brighter in the dream world. This is the vision realm, she explained softly. It is not true memory, only a reflection. We must walk together, or they will see it as a bad omen. Ethan followed her as they walked across a bridge of starlight. He felt light as air, yet strangely calm. Though he knew it was only a ritual, part of him felt that this was more real than the dining hall. He glanced at Zaira. She walked proudly, but he noticed the tension in her shoulders. You don't want this marriage, do you? Ethan asked quietly. She looked at him, surprised by his directness. For a moment, her proud mask slipped. No, but I must. My people expect it. Ethan nodded slowly. And now, instead of your groom, you're stuck with me by mistake. A faint smile touched her lips. Perhaps the stars enjoy cruel jokes. Before Ethan could reply, the vision began to fade. The dream dissolved into light, and suddenly he was back in the dining hall, his hands still in the glowing bowl. The crowd cheered softly, pleased with what they had witnessed. The ritual ended, and the evening slowly came to a close. Guests drifted away, whispering to each other about the human groom. Ethan finally had a chance to breathe, but just as he relaxed, he noticed something strange. One of the glowing lanterns above the hall flickered, then sparked. A moment later, it burst, showering sparks dangerously close to the guests. Guards rushed to contain it, and the music stopped. Zaira's eyes narrowed. "That was no accident," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "You mean sabotage?" She nodded. "Someone does not want this marriage to happen. They may not care who the groom is. They only want to see failure." The thought made Ethan uneasy. It was bad enough pretending to be a groom. Now there were people trying to destroy the whole event. Later that night, Ethan returned to the royal quarters assigned to him. The room was enormous, with walls that shimmered like water and a bed big enough for 10 people. He sat down heavily, running his hands over his face. "This is insane," he muttered. "How am I supposed to survive this?" A soft knock came at the door. Zaira entered, still wearing her ceremonial gown. She closed the door and looked at him seriously. "You did well tonight," she said. "Clumsy, but honest." "That honesty may be your strength." Ethan chuckled weakly. "Great, my strength is being confused and talking about pizza." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "It may be enough." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship surrounding them. Then Zaira spoke again, her voice low. "There is danger here. Someone is trying to stop this marriage. We must be careful. You must stay close to me at all times." Ethan nodded slowly. "So, I'm not just pretending to be a groom anymore. I'm also your bodyguard?" "Perhaps," she said softly. "Or perhaps we are both protecting each other, for the first time since the mistake began." Ethan saw something in her silver eyes that was not frustration or duty. It was trust. Small, fragile, but real. Outside their chamber, hidden in the corridors, shadows moved again. Figures whispered, watching the human groom and the alien princess. The flickering lantern had only been a warning. The real danger was still to come. And as the celestial veil sailed deeper into the galaxy, Ethan realized this honeymoon was not just a celebration. It was the beginning of a dangerous journey. The celestial veil sailed silently through space, its silver hull glowing like a lantern among the stars. From the outside, it looked untouchable, a perfect ship built for peace and celebration. But inside, trouble was quietly spreading. Ethan Cole did not need to be an expert to notice that something was wrong. He had never been on a ship like this before, but even he could tell that flickering lights and strange alarms were not normal. Ever since the feast, small malfunctions had started happening across the cruiser. Doors stuck halfway open. Lights flickered without warning. Whole sections of the ship lost gravity for a few minutes, sending guests floating through the halls until the systems came back. At first, people laughed nervously, calling them small inconveniences, but Ethan noticed the worried looks on the faces of the engineers and guards. These problems were too many, too frequent, and too carefully timed. One morning, as he walked with Zaira through a long glass corridor that looked out into open space, the ship suddenly shook. Alarms blared, and the floor beneath them tilted sharply. Ethan grabbed the railing just in time, pulling Zaira against him before she could stumble. Through the glass walls, they saw the ship drifting dangerously close to an asteroid field. "Navigation is failing," a voice cried through the speakers. Zaira's silver eyes narrowed. "This is no accident." Ethan's heart pounded. "What do we do?" Before she could answer, the glass corridor sealed itself, and a panel in the wall slid open. A team of Starian engineers rushed in, their glowing suits humming with energy. They spoke quickly in their own language, pressing crystals and tools against the wall. But after several minutes, nothing changed. The ship continued to drift. Ethan looked at their tools, their glowing instruments, and their confused expressions. They seemed to be scanning and recalibrating endlessly, but the asteroid field was getting closer by the second. He stepped forward, ignoring Zaira's warning look. "Hey," Ethan said. "Can I take a look?" The chief engineer frowned. Human, this is advanced Starian technology. You will not understand. Maybe not, Ethan said. But sometimes simple problems need simple answers. What if it's not complicated? What if it's something small, like a loose connection? The engineers exchanged doubtful looks, but Zaira spoke firmly. Let him try. With her support, Ethan knelt beside the panel. He ran his hands along the wires, feeling for heat or movement. He remembered how he used to fix old machines back on Earth, how sometimes a broken radio only needed a wire pushed back into place. Sure enough, he found a loose connection hidden under a crystal plate. The alien engineers had been scanning for digital errors, but none of their tools could detect something so physical and basic. Ethan twisted the wire back into place with his bare hands. Instantly, the alarm stopped. The ship's engines roared, and the cruiser pulled away from the asteroid field. The engineer stared in shock. Zaira let out a long breath. You did it, she said softly. Ethan stood, brushing his hands on his robe. It wasn't magic. It was just a loose wire. Back home, we call that a wiggly connection. The chief engineer bowed his head reluctantly. Strange, but effective. Perhaps human methods are not so primitive after all. Word spread quickly across the cruiser. The human groom had saved the ship with his bare hands. Some passengers laughed at the idea, but others began to whisper with respect. Perhaps humans had strengths that advanced technology overlooked. Zaira noticed the change too. That night, as they sat in a quiet garden chamber filled with glowing flowers, she turned to him. You surprised them, she said. Even me, I thought you would panic, but instead you acted. You solved what they could not. Ethan shrugged. I've always been good at fixing small things. On Earth, my friends called me the guy with tape and tools. I didn't think that would matter out here. It matters, Zaira said firmly. Her silver eyes softened. Maybe the stars chose you for a reason. Ethan looked away, embarrassed. Or maybe I'm just really lucky. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the hum of the ship. The air smelled faintly sweet from the flowers, and the ceiling above showed an artificial sky full of drifting stars. But the peace did not last long. 2 days later, while the cruiser crossed a quiet stretch of space, the sabotage returned. This time it was worse. First, the power in one wing of the ship went out completely. Guests floated helplessly in the dark as gravity failed. Then, an engine overheated, shaking the entire vessel. Fire alarms screamed across the halls. Guards rushed to protect passengers, but it was chaos. Ethan and Zaira ran with them, trying to reach the control center. Along the way, they passed broken panels, sparking wires, and smoke that filled the corridors. Ethan grabbed a piece of cloth and tied it over his mouth to breathe. Zaira copied him, her elegant gown trailing behind as they pushed through the confusion. When they reached the control chamber, the captain and crew were shouting over each other. Screens flickered with warnings in bright red. The engines are locked, one officer cried. Navigation is unresponsive, shouted another. We're losing control. Ethan felt panic rise in his chest, but he forced himself to think. He looked at the main console, a glowing panel full of alien symbols. The crew was frantically pressing buttons, but nothing worked. What if it's the same problem as before? Ethan said. The captain frowned. Explain something simple, Ethan said. A loose connection, a broken switch. You're all focused on the systems, but what if the problem isn't in the code? What if it's physical again? The captain hesitated, but Zaira spoke firmly. Listen to him. He was right before. Reluctantly, the crew opened the panels beneath the console. Ethan crawled inside, coughing at the smell of burnt wires. He spotted a crystal node that had been deliberately cracked, small enough to escape notice, but critical to the system. He pulled it free, twisting 2 wires together in its place. The console beeped. The engines roared back to life. The ship steadied. The captain stared. Impossible. How did you know? Ethan climbed out, wiping sweat from his forehead. Back on Earth, we say, when a machine stops, always check if something's broken or unplugged. Usually, it's that simple. The crew exchanged shocked looks. The human groom had saved them again, but not everyone was impressed. Later that night, as Ethan returned to his chamber, he felt something strange. The corridor was too quiet. The usual guards were gone. His footsteps echoed against the walls. Then, shadow moved. From the ceiling dropped three figures dressed in black armor, their faces hidden by masks. They carried strange weapons that glowed faintly in the dark. Ethan froze. One of them spoke in a low voice. The human groom. End him, and the marriage ends with him. Ethan's blood ran cold. He had no training, no weapon. Instinctively, he grabbed the nearest object, a decorative vase glowing with crystal light. The assassins lunged. Ethan swung the vase wildly, smashing it against one attacker's helmet. Sparks flew, and the figure staggered back. The other two pressed forward, blades humming, just as one blade came down. Zaira appeared from the side corridor, her silver eyes blazing. She drew a ceremonial staff from her gown and struck with surprising strength, knocking the weapon aside. "Stay back," she shouted to Ethan, but Ethan couldn't. Heart pounding, he grabbed a broken shard of the vase and held it like a knife. "I'm not just going to hide." Together, they fought clumsily, but desperately. Zaira's training and Ethan's stubbornness created a strange rhythm. He blocked attacks with improvised moves while she struck with precision. One assassin fell, then another. The last hissed angrily, retreating into the shadows. "You cannot protect him forever." "Princess," the masked figure warned before vanishing. Breathing heavily, Ethan leaned against the wall. "So, that just happened." Zaire stood tall, her gown torn, but her eyes fierce. "It is worse than I feared. They are not just sabotaging the ship. They want you dead." Ethan swallowed hard. "And if they kill me, the whole marriage fails." "Yes," Zaira said quietly. "And then war may follow." Ethan stared at her, his heart racing. He had come here by mistake, dragged into a role he never wanted. But now he realized it was no longer just a mistake. His survival mattered not just to Zaira, but to empires. Somehow, he had to keep going, but deep down, he knew the assassins would not stop until one of them was gone, and the next attack would be worse. The Starliner floated through the dark sea of space like a glowing palace. Its crystal towers and silver hull reflected the light of distant stars. And inside, noble guests still whispered about the human groom who had stood against danger during the sabotage. Ethan, however, was not celebrating. He sat in the observation lounge with Princess Zaira. Staring at the galaxy outside the wide glass panels, the stars should have calmed him. But he could not stop thinking about the assassins who had tried to ruin everything. They had vanished into the shadows of the ship, yet Ethan felt their threat pressing closer every moment. Zaira leaned back in her chair, her violet eyes sharp with thought. "They will not give up," she said softly. "Rival empires fear this marriage, whether with you or with the groom they planned. They will strike again." Ethan gave a tired laugh. "That's comforting. Thanks for the pep talk." Zaira turned her gaze on him, her expression both stern and curious. "You joke at the edge of danger. Most would not." Ethan shrugged. "That's what humans do. If we're scared, we laugh. If we're in trouble, we try something crazy. It's not bravery. It's survival." Zaira's lips curved slightly. It was not a smile of mockery, but of respect. "Perhaps that is why you surprise everyone here." Even me, preparing for trouble the next day, the Starliner continued its journey. Guards patrolled the halls, engineers checked the systems again and again, and nobles avoided traveling alone. Still, the air on the ship was heavy with worry. Zaira trained in the exercise hall, her twin blades flashing with graceful precision. Ethan stood nearby, awkwardly holding a staff one of the guards had lent him. He had no skill, but he wanted to be ready. "You will not win a duel with strength," Zaira told him. "You are human. Use what you have: speed, surprise, and stubbornness." Ethan grinned, panting as he tried to copy her moves. "Stubbornness? I've got plenty of. Surprise? Maybe I can throw my shoes at them." Zaira actually laughed a clear, soft laugh that startled him more than any sword swing. She caught his wrist gently and guided his grip. "Not shoes. But your mind may strike harder than any weapon." The assassins returned that night. The assassins came. The ship's lights dimmed suddenly, plunging corridors into half-darkness. An alarm wailed through the halls. Passengers panicked, running for safety. Armored figures in black cloaks forced their way aboard from a hidden shuttle. Ethan and Zyra were in the grand dining hall when the first attackers appeared. The nobles screamed and scattered. Guards rushed forward but were quickly pushed back by energy blades and plasma rifles. One assassin pointed at Ethan. The human. End him, and the marriage dies. Ethan's heart hammered, but he stepped forward anyway. Great, I'm the target again. Story of my life. He grabbed the long serving tray from a banquet table and raised it like a shield. When the assassin swung, Ethan blocked with a loud clang. The force nearly knocked him over, but he stayed on his feet. Zyra leapt beside him, her twin blades crossing in a brilliant arc of light. Stay behind me, she shouted, but Ethan refused. He ducked low, swung the tray, and struck the assassin's knee. The alien stumbled, more from shock than pain. No one expected the human groom to fight back with a piece of tableware, fighting with human stubbornness. The battle spread through the dining hall. Chandeliers of glowing crystals shook and cracked. Tables overturned. Food and dishes scattered across the shining floor. Ethan used anything he could grab: chairs, plates, even a tall vest to confuse the assassins. He was clumsy, untrained, and often barely dodged strikes that should have ended him. But his unpredictability frustrated the attackers. One assassin sneered, lunging at him. You are weak. You cannot stand against us. Double quotes. Ethan, breathless and sweating, laughed. Maybe I can't, but I can trip you. He kicked a fallen chair under the alien's foot. The assassin toppled, and Zyra struck with her blade. Forcing the enemy to retreat, the nobles hiding in the corners gasped in disbelief. To them, this human was no warrior, yet he refused to fall. Every time he stumbled, he rose again. Every time he was cornered, he found some wild, strange way to escape. The turning point, the assassins regrouped, surrounding Ethan and Zyra. There were too many. Even Zyra, with all her skill, looked worried. Ethan's chest heaved. He knew he could not win by fighting like them. He had to think differently. His eyes flicked up. Above them, the crystal chandelier trembled from the earlier fight. Its chains strained. Zyra, cover me, he shouted. She obeyed without question, holding the assassins back for a few precious seconds. Ethan grabbed a fork from the floor, aimed carefully, and threw it upward. The fork struck the chain. The chandelier cracked loose and crashed down, shattering into a storm of brilliant shards. The assassins were thrown back by the impact. Dazzling light filled the hall. The nobles gasped again, this time with awe. The human had turned the enemy's advantage into chaos and given everyone hope. Aftermath of the battle: when the assassins retreated, limping and furious, the dining hall was a wreck. Guards rushed in to secure the area. Nobles cautiously emerged from hiding. Ethan sat on the floor exhausted, his clothes torn and his arms bruised. He let out a shaky laugh. Well, I think that chandelier had better aim than me. Zyra stood over him, her expression unreadable for a long moment. Then she knelt, her voice low. You risked everything, with no training, no armor, no reason to fight but when you would not let me fall. Ethan shrugged weakly. I told you, humans are stubborn. Once we care about something, we don't let go. This time, Zyra did not hide her smile. Then perhaps I was mistaken about you, Ethan Cole. You are not only stubborn, you are extraordinary. Growing respecting the following days, word spread through the Starliner. Passengers bowed slightly to Ethan as he walked past. Guards saluted him. Nobles whispered that maybe this human groom was exactly what the galaxy needed. An unpredictable hero. One who did not fight like anyone else. Ethan, embarrassed by the attention, tried to avoid it. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who threw a fork at a chandelier. But Zyra's eyes softened whenever she looked at him. She had been raised to believe only trained warriors or royal leaders could inspire respect. Yet this human, with his humor, mistakes, and stubborn courage, had done what no one expected. For the first time since her engagement had been arranged, Zyra began to feel hope. Maybe she did not have to follow a path carved by others. Maybe she could choose. Shadows still lingered despite the victory. Danger was not gone. The assassins had failed, but their words remained like a dark echo. This marriage will never succeed. Late one evening, As Ethan and Zara stood together in the observation lounge, the stars gleamed around them. "Do you regret it?" Zara asked suddenly. "That you were mistaken for my groom? That you were caught in a storm not meant for you?" Ethan thought for a long moment. "Honestly, at first, yeah. I just wanted a quiet life. But now, no. I don't regret it. Because if I hadn't been mistaken, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you." Zaira turned to face him, her eyes shimmering like the nebula beyond the glass. For a heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Before either could speak again, the ship's alarm blared once more. A message came across the intercom. Approaching vessel detected heavily armed. All hands prepare. The assassins were not finished, and the next storm would be greater than anything yet. The galaxy outside the observation windows shimmered with cold beauty. Stars sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet, but there was no peace in the sight. The Starliner's alarms screamed through every corridor, shaking passengers out of sleep and calm. A heavily armed vessel had appeared out of the dark. Its jagged hull glowed with red lights, and its weapons bays opened like the jaws of a predator. The rival empire had arrived to end the marriage before it could be sealed. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, staring at the sight of the warship. He had never seen anything so large, so dangerous, so certain of destruction. He whispered under his breath, "That thing could swallow this whole ship in one bite." Beside him, Zaira stood tall, her face calm, though her eyes were sharp with determination. "This is it. They will not stop until either you are gone, or I am forced into their chains." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we don't let them win. Not this time." A meeting of leaders, the nobles, gathered in the grand hall, fear heavy in the air. Guards lined the walls, ready but nervous. Zaira's family appeared on a massive holoscreen, their royal robes glowing faintly. They were far away on their homeworld, but their voices filled the chamber. "You must surrender," said one council elder. "We cannot risk this ship being destroyed. Give them what they want. End this mistake." Another elder frowned. The human was never meant to be part of this. He should leave now. Perhaps then, peace can still be saved. Ethan stepped forward before Zaira could speak. His voice shook at first, but then grew stronger. "With respect, no. If I leave now, if I run, then these assassins win. They'll keep forcing you, keep controlling you. They'll never stop." The nobles murmured in shock. A human, speaking against the council, was unheard of. Zaira raised her chin, her voice ringing clear. "Ethan speaks truth. This is no longer about tradition. It is about choice, and I will not let them take mine away." The enemy arrives, the rival ship sent a shuttle to board the Starliner. From it stepped the figure that had been waiting all along Zara's intended fiancé. He was tall, armored, and carried himself with arrogance. His golden crest shimmered, and his voice dripped with disdain as he entered the hall. "So this is the human who dares steal my place." Ethan swallowed hard but stood his ground. "I didn't steal anything. It was a mistake. But I'm not going to apologize for protecting her when you couldn't." The alien noble's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You are nothing. A fragile creature from a primitive world. You will kneel, and you will vanish from history." The room held its breath. Nobles looked from Ethan to the alien prince, waiting for Ethan to bow. Instead, the human took a deep breath and shook his head. "No, humans don't kneel unless we choose to. And I choose to stand." The dual-the alien prince laughed coldly. "Then you will fall." He drew a blade glowing with blue fire, the weapon humming with energy. Zaira stepped forward, but Ethan gently raised a hand. "No, this one's mine." He had no armor, no glowing blade, only a staff from the guards. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears. Fear clawed at his chest, but he forced himself to move. The duel began. The alien prince struck fast, his blade slicing through the air with deadly speed. Ethan barely dodged, rolling across the floor and scrambling up again. The nobles gasped at the sight of such clumsy human movement against perfect trained skill. Again and again, the prince attacked. Again and again, Ethan dodged, blocked with his staff, or stumbled out of the way. He was slower, weaker, but he was unpredictable. "Fight properly," The prince shouted angrily. Ethan grinned breathlessly. This is properly for a human. He swung his staff low, tapped the prince's ankle, and darted aside. The crowd gasped as the mighty noble stumbled. It was not a great strike, but it was enough to show that Ethan would not be an easy victim. Human endurance, the duel dragged on. The alien prince grew angrier with every missed strike. His attacks became heavier, more violent. Ethan's arms shook from the effort of blocking. His breath came ragged, sweat dripping into his eyes. But he refused to stop. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest, but they were stubborn, and stubbornness kept him standing when he should have fallen. Finally, the alien prince lunged with all his strength, certain he would end it. Ethan twisted at the last moment, letting the prince's blade strike the floor instead. Sparks flew. Ethan swung the staff with everything he had left, striking the prince's side. The noble cried out, stumbling backward. The hall erupted in gasps and murmurs. The human had landed a real blow. A shocking choice. The alien prince, furious and humiliated, raised his blade again. But before he could strike, Zira stepped between them, her own swords flashing into her hands. Enough, she declared. I will not be forced into your chains. This human has shown more courage than any of you who claim to be my protectors. He fights not for power, not for empire, but for me. That is the partner I choose. The hall went silent. Nobles stared in shock. The council's hollow images flickered with outrage. The alien prince's face twisted with fury. This is treason, he shouted. Zara's eyes blazed. No, this is freedom. The council decides, the rival warship prepared to fire, but the council was forced to act quickly. They could not deny what everyone had seen. The human had stood against assassins, against a noble prince, and had not broken. The passengers of the Starliner, the guards, done. And even the nobles themselves were whispering now in support of Ethan and Zaira. The elder council finally spoke. Perhaps fate has chosen better than politics. The human may not be the groom we arranged, but he is the groom who has proven worthy. The alien prince shouted in rage, but his own soldiers pulled him back, realizing the tide had turned. To continue would mean war they could not win. With burning anger, he returned to his shuttle and left. The rival warship retreated into the dark, humiliated. A real beginning? The Starliner calmed once more, though its passengers would never forget what they had witnessed. Ethan, bruised and exhausted, sat on the edge of the grand hall. Zojera approached him quietly, her swords now sheathed. You are reckless, she said softly. Ethan chuckled weakly. Yeah, I get that a lot. Then her voice warmed, gentle and sure. But you are also the bravest person I have ever known. You were mistaken for my groom, Ethan Cole, but now you are my true choice. Ethan looked at her, still unsure if he belonged in this galaxy of nobles and warriors. But in her eyes, he saw no doubt, only trust. Slowly, he smiled. Then I guess this honeymoon is just beginning. Epilogue: The Celestial Veil continued its journey across the stars. Whispers of the human groom spread across systems, reaching worlds that had never even heard of Earth. Some laughed at the story. Some doubted it, but others began to wonder if a simple human could stand against empires. What else were humans capable of? And so Ethan Cole, once just a roommate caught in a mistake, became something more. Not a hero by design, not a groom by arrangement, but a man who proved that sometimes the greatest power in the galaxy was not strength or tradition, but the courage to choose.